You are listening to Conversations on the Way with your host, Nana Jumpy. Now, the state of Georgia and the city of Atlanta is being just disgraceful. Disgraceful, disgusting, and dangerous. Man, I find it beyond ironic that the same Georgia and Atlanta that claims to be the symbols of democracy in action in this modern times are doing their level best to crush the democratic process when it comes to the referendum to stop Cop City. We continue our conversation about that continuing effort to ensure that Cop City will never be built with Aimée Castenell. Aimée Castenell is a senior digital strategist and digital producer for the Working Families Party. Woohoo! She has over 15 years of experience in digital strategy and change communications with a focus on human rights, racial justice, voter engagement among communities of color, and economic justice. She holds an MA in activism and social change from the University of Leeds and a BA in anthropology from Smith College. Originally from New Orleans, Louisiana, Aimée currently calls Atlanta, Georgia home. She lives by the motto, a good story, well told, can change lives. Welcome back, Aimée.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be back with good news, no less.
With good news, no less. All right. Now, look, there's so many twists and turns that are happening with Cop City, with the referendum. I mean, it's darn near getting to be like Real Housewives of Atlanta, but we'll talk about that in a minute. It's like Real House Politicians of Atlanta or something. I don't know. But at any rate, some people, if you're not on social media where you're looking at this all day, it might be a little confusing as to what is happening. The last time you came on, there had been a city council meeting, the referendum had started, signatures were being collected. Tell us what has happened since that signature collection process.
It has been a summer to remember, I'll have to say. For the past I guess around 70 days, we have been collecting signatures, having conversations with people all over the city of Atlanta. We had about 500 people volunteer to canvass with us and hit the streets. We were taking people to barbecues, farmers markets, school pickup lines, grocery stores, fast food restaurants, coffee shops, bars, nightclubs, like all kinds of places. Any place that people would be, we were there to talk to them about this referendum campaign and how they could get involved. If they couldn't sign, we asked them if they would volunteer. If they didn't want to volunteer, we asked them if they would donate money. We were just, I mean, it was a community effort on the highest level. And I mean, I'm talking about like we had people from like grandmothers who had never done any activism at all, never canvassed anything, had never even thought about it, were involved in this campaign, walking the streets every single day with petitions, asking people to sign, which is unbelievably amazing, all the way down to like high school students who obviously could not sign this petition. They were never 18 and old enough to vote in 2021, but they also could recognize that like what's at stake in this referendum is far beyond like the actual conversation that people are having about Cop City. In fact, just the fact that people were talking about Cop City was something that I found to be truly amazing, because we were walking around. This is $90 million basically that the city of Atlanta is pledging towards this thing. Around 60 something million coming from public funds, and then the rest being put up by corporations and whatnot. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money for any city. It's certainly a lot of money for this city to like dedicate to something that no one knows about, which was the problem. Like we were walking around the city being like, what do you think about Cop City? Do you think that we should be able to put this on the ballot? We should be able to decide as a city like what we want. And people would say, what is that? They had no clue. Not only, and if they did have a clue about what it was, they had some kind of like misinformation about it. They
Right.
definitely did not know how much money was being allocated to that thing. So it just was like, it's been a very difficult summer. We're going around asking people to sign, making sure that we stick to the very stringent rules that the city put up around the signature collection process. Because when we first started, they said that, well, first of all, the signatures all had to be taken in person within the city limits of the city of Atlanta, on paper with a black pen. Like that is how specific they were, with a black
Oh
pen.
my gosh, they went to the ink color.
They went to the ink color, and each sheet of paper that we had people sign on had a number at the bottom of it because they were individually numbered. So you couldn't like make a photocopy of these papers. It had to be that exact paper, which was, when you're sending people out with like a clipboard and to go canvassing, that alone is a big process. To expect people to keep those papers together and bring them back to you and not lose these numbers, that was difficult. But we did a lot of work to tell people like how important each one of these pieces of paper was, and that each signature that they have on this paper is a human person that they talked to about this campaign, and that person said, I want to have a choice. So you can't just like, lose these signatures like, oh, my dog ate it or whatever. No, those are real people. And so thankfully, everybody who volunteered with us, everybody who canvassed with us, they also agreed and thought that was important. And so they came back with all the signatures that we needed and more, and so much more, which is why we had a party last night to celebrate. We ended up collecting 116,000 signatures, which is more than even voted for Andre Dickens in the 2021 election. So that to me is a mandate. The city council should have just said, thank you for these signatures. We clearly see the writing is on the wall. Let's put this on the ballot and have people decide. But instead, they said, we're not going to start verifying these signatures. We're waiting to hear what the 11th Circuit Court has to say. We are putting another barrier in this process towards democracy.
No, all that it was a whirlwind just hearing it, in terms of all that has happened. And I think it's important, and I really appreciate you saying all of that in that short time to tease out some of those pieces. When we talk about democracy, I think about, because I'm old as dirt and twice as funky, the anti-apartheid movement and how that was reduced to one person, one vote, right? Which is really where democracy should be. Are you here? Are you a part of the society? Are you an adult? And, if you can go to war at 18, maybe you should be able to do with, all these pieces, right? But are you an adult? And then are you able, therefore, to be, you should be able to participate in making decisions about how your neighborhood, how your state, how your city, how your country operates, right? And anything that gets between you and that ballot box is a barrier. And I don't think people understand that. Like, when they say you have to have ID, that is a barrier. When they say you have to come to a certain place, that is a barrier. And that's not unusual, these barriers in terms of voting, what we see happening just with regular voting. We haven't getting to the referendum stage. So, what are your thoughts about that? Because I think when people hear, oh, you had to be in the city of LA, they're like, well, yeah, it's LA. Atlanta, they're like, oh, it's an Atlanta thing. Or, people think it's normal to have all of these restrictions, but it's not normal. Talk a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, even just saying that you have to be within the city limits of the city of Atlanta. A lot of people who live in Atlanta genuinely, and this is not like to make fun of Atlanta, I love Atlanta, but a lot of people who live in Atlanta do not know that they don't live in Atlanta, because we have a lot of like cities that have like incorporated that are very close and like weave in and out of the city of Atlanta's borders. So there's like the city of South Fulton, there's East Point, College Park. If you listen to rap music, you've heard these places and you're like, oh yeah, that's Atlanta. It actually isn't. Those are separate cities. And so people who live there would think, I can sign this petition, and then they could not. Or they would think, I can take this to my like neighborhood block party, and they live in East Point. It's like, no, you can't, because they cannot sign that there. And then that's not even to count like the other suburbs that are around Atlanta, which people also say they live in Atlanta. I went to high school in Marietta, Georgia, which is about 40 minutes from the city of Atlanta. And yet when people ask me where I lived, I said Atlanta, because why else would they know where Marietta was? And it is literally just a suburb of the city of Atlanta. So that's just like one small part of it, like the specificity about the location. But there were so many things, even before we get to the part where they refuse to verify these signatures, and they want to use a a very controversial signature match when they're going through the verification process. That's been like spoken about as part of the process. But that's obviously those are anti-democratic processes that they're trying to implement. And the fact that Democrats are doing it is problematic on another level. And that is happening in Atlanta, which is, voting rights, the cradle of civil rights, all these things. You would think that it would be unexpected for that to be taking place within this city. And yet we are bearing witness to something that's not new to anybody who's done any kind of work with regards to like democracy and having the people have a voice. I mean, often like when people are in power, they want to maintain that power. And so they'll do anything. And in this case, it was clear that they were using bureaucracy to put barriers up. So it was the place that you had to have it signed. Originally, it was the person who could collect the signatures. They were saying that only a resident of the city of Atlanta could be the person who's even circulating the petition. So if you lived in DeKalb County, or which is where Cop City, the location that they want to lease to build Cop City on is in DeKalb County. So if you lived in that neighborhood and you were like, well, at least I can't sign it, but I would like to help get signatures for this, you couldn't do it. That's why they're waiting right now for the decision from the 11th Circuit Court, because we had a decision like midway through the collection process where a federal judge said, this is actually like unconstitutional. You should allow anyone to collect these signatures. It shouldn't matter if they live in Atlanta or they live in Alpharetta or they live in Timbuktu. They should be able to collect the signatures. Now, certainly the people who sign should be people who are, stick to this criteria, but anybody should be able to collect, which is why we got a little bit of extra time, because the judge also said, since you had to spend so much time with this like wrong version of the rule, then we're going to give you a little bit extra time to collect signatures. So that now we're waiting to hear from another judge who is making a ruling on that, because the city of Atlanta disputed that ruling, wasting more taxpayer dollars on fighting a process that they themselves told us to do. We said we want you to not fund Cop City. Do not lease this land to the Atlanta Police Foundation. We did public comment, hours and hours of public comment, and they did it anyway. And so after that, we said, what can we do now? And we already talked about this. We started the referendum process, which is a very, very seldom used process to get like direct democracy going, have people make a decision about what they want to vote on and then vote on it. And that when we first embarked on this, the city was like, great, good luck to you. But when they realized that we were actually getting these signatures, they were like, oh no, what else can we do to stop this? And so it's just been like one thing after another. I mean, even just like going around and talking to people and having them sign these petitions was like really eye-opening to me on a lot of levels, because like you are entering neighborhoods that you don't always go to and talking to people about the things that are happening around them, like what they want to see done with this money. And so that in and of itself was incredibly eye-opening. But even just like the process of it, like the physical process of signing this paper, you see people who have, perhaps low literacy rates. You see a lot of people who don't write very often at all, because it's 2023 and most people are not using pen and paper to do their jobs or anything. And so people are just unaccustomed to writing. You also see people who have like neurological disorders or like essential tremor or something. They can't necessarily write legibly or clearly. And that's part of it. Like people have to sign this paper with their own hand, which doesn't make any sense given the fact that we vote electronically in the state of Georgia. So the fact that people had to use pen and paper on this thing is just another example of them like, trying to block. But yeah, like it's really like it was not accessible to a lot of people. Like this petition was not accessible. And even in the sense that like, if you're a person who cannot leave your home, this summer was about over 100 degrees every single day. So it's hot, real hot. Some people can't be outside in that kind of heat. And so those people who would have gladly signed this petition couldn't even have access to it unless we went to their homes. And so that's another thing that we ended up doing is we started canvassing people in their own homes and going and knocking on doors and talking to people there. It was just, it was just a very frustrating process. But also I want to underscore all that frustration and all that like shenanigans from the city with the fact that like I'm coming out of this so pleased and so happy with like my community and my neighbors, and the way that people have like shown up for this campaign in a way that, when we first started doing it, people were like, who cares? But once we started talking, and once people started to see the way that the city was really trying to squash democracy for no discernible reason, really, other than money, that's really ugly. And so people were energized by it and like activated by it in a way that I have not seen in this city in a long time, or anywhere really.
Or anywhere really. I mean, there's a couple of things that come to mind as you were talking through all that, the shenanigans, but also all that was done to overcome those shenanigans, because obviously you got the signatures and more. So, so as the old Black people say, the devil is a lie. As is Andre Dickens, and maybe there's some algebraic equation there.
Perhaps.
Because as you said, he was like, the city will do nothing to get in the way of this referendum. I mean, literally, I'm dang near quoting him word for word. Yes. And the city did everything that it could do, short of shooting people down from helicopters, to keep this process from being able to move forward. And it's like, what are you afraid of? And I'm thinking, when you were talking about the, where people live and what it means, etc., I know, because Baji, Black Alliance for Just Immigration, that I, helms to some degree, has offices in Georgia. So we know what's happening with our folks there. But this is everywhere, okay? This is not just Georgia. These police do not obey any lines.
No.
Okay. So what is going to happen in Cop City, if Cop City were to be built, which it will not, would be something that impacts not just DeKalb County, not just Atlanta, not just Georgia. It's coming to a place near you. It's coming to LA, it's coming to New York, it's coming to rural Poughkeepsie, it's coming to Accra, Ghana, it's coming to Israel, and it's coming, the area occupied since 1948, as I refer to it. It's coming to Palestine. This is what it's going to do, because this is how these folks work with each other.
Yeah.
On the electoral level and on the police level. And so when you see this insistence that it has to be a person that is within certain limits, when you see the insistence on going back to pen and paper with respect to Cop City, do not think, folks in Los Angeles, in New York, in Miami, in Mississippi, and these other places, in Michigan and Minneapolis, that they're not going to go, oh, that's a barrier we can use, and begin to use those same barriers, if they haven't already, throughout the places where we are. So this is not something where we can just say, oh, it's just happening over there. No, whatever is happening with respect to Cop City, trust and believe it's happening everywhere.
Yeah. And I mean, earlier in the conversation, you mentioned like how dangerous this is. And that's exactly why, because we don't live in like silos, and all these things don't happen in a vacuum. So when people who have like, a nefarious purpose, they want to do whatever it is that they want to do, maintain power, build power, squash dissent, be a fascist, I don't know, all the ways in which people want to do those things, they look to other places and say like, what worked over here? What worked over there? Could I do it here? That looks like it's going to work. It looked like it did good over on this side. Like those people really had a hard time getting the thing done. And so that, even on that level, not just like, obviously they're already making plans to build different cop cities in lots of other places. Like they're already talking about doing one in Baltimore. I forget the other place that is currently talking about starting construction on these things. That's not even like other places saying like, we would like to do that. There's places right now where they're saying we are going to do that. So people should be concerned on that level, but also be concerned on the level of like democracy. We live in a country where we are constantly like talking about how great it is to be here. Everybody gets a vote. It's kumbaya. But we have seen time and time again, when you have an opinion that people don't want to hear, they will do almost anything either within legal bounds or not, ask Donald Trump to get what they want and use whatever tools that are available. And this right here, while we are using the tool of the referendum, because we said, okay, we have another avenue by which we can get the people's voice into public discourse. We don't have to do only one thing. They're also using tools, one of which is make this process incredibly difficult. Another one is say that the process is flawed and you don't want to accept it after you made us do the whole thing. It's very, very deeply disturbing.
It is, to say the least. And, recently I got a flyer, and I'm going to try to be real vague in general so people don't feel dissed, but I got a flyer for an event that's happening around Haiti and these demands that are being made around the United States. And one of the demands is restore democracy in Haiti. I'm like, people, first of all, the United States is the reason there is not democracy in Haiti. But putting that to the side, how can this country be restoring democracy somewhere?
Start here. The call is coming from inside the house.
Restore democracy in the ATL. Restore democracy. What? And so you would think that just to save face, right? That just to save face, that some of these Democratic leaders on the higher levels would have jumped in this, with their whole bodies. And I know, we try not to be too critical of folks, because we try not to be too critical of folks. We're trying to think about ways that we cannot shame and blame as good abolitionists do, and think of ways that we can address things in differently. But, abolition is not contrary to consequences, first of all. And it does require and demand that people are self-accountable. How can this be happening? And we have all of these leaders that are, paraded around the world. Andre is paraded around the world. I was in Geneva for the committee to eliminate racist discrimination. And there the CERD, and there he was. And he was the symbol. And Georgia and Atlanta were the symbol of how the United States is trying to do better, right? Clearly, Stacey Abrams, Senator Warnock, all of these folks are, presented as part of Democracy USA. Yeah. And yet we just didn't get that jump in. That seems to have changed a little bit. Talk to us about that so that people also get that part of what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this past couple of days, honestly. We have seen statements come from Senator Warnock and Stacey Abrams, both of whom are questioning why Andre Dickens is refusing to allow this process to play out the way it was written to do, questioning the verification process that they've presented, which includes signature match, which is something that the state of Georgia had to settle when they were being sued for doing signature match and something called exact match, which is even more more criteria than signature match. But either which way, those ways of evaluating things have been proven time and time and time again to be discriminatory against lots of people for lots of reasons. One of which is what I was talking about before. Like if you have a shaky hand because maybe you got into a car accident and you no longer have the same kind of eye-hand coordination than you did when you got your license originally. Because also, even just the process of that, when you get your driver's license in Georgia, you sign an electronic plate. Everybody's seen that, you sign credit card, etc. That signature is not going to be the same signature that you have when you write with a pen and paper. It just isn't. It can't be. But that's what that's what they would be using to match if they were to use signature match. So already on that base level, you can know for a fact that it's not good. And so, we actually had conversations. People have been talking to, I mean, not me, but people have been talking to Senator Warnock. They've been talking to Stacey Abrams because for those exact reasons. These people are voting rights champions. They go around the world talking about democracy and voting rights. And then here we sit in Atlanta where these people are from? and we're like, why are you saying anything about this? This is something y'all should be looking at and talking about. And so thankfully, finally, they have come out and said, called into question all of these things. And so now I think like a lot of people who have been working on this campaign feel supported in a way that we have not in the past like couple of months, because there's been like a deafening silence just from like all these like voting rights advocates and such that are all around. I mean, I feel like, Nana, you understand this more deeply than most people, because you and I both know within the immigrant rights movement, there can often be a deafening silence when we say Black immigrants. All of a sudden, the Black made everybody go to sleep. They're like, oh, wait, I forgot. Y'all are still here?
I love that. Y'all
like, it felt like that. Like because like I work in like the voting rights space. I work with progressives all the time who are like, we love democracy. So I'm thinking everybody's gonna come to us now. Like, we're doing this campaign, we're gonna have support from every corner of the universe. And yet it took a lot of time and a lot of people's effort to get folks to understand what's really at stake here. Because I think a lot of people heard like Cop City and they're like, oh God, like that's controversial. Like, I don't want anything to do with it. And it's like, you should have something to do with it because it's controversial, quite frankly. But also, even just like understand the many layers that are going on here that have, even if you want Cop City to be built, you might think, oh, I love cops, or I want cops to have more training. I want cops to have this specific kind of, urban warfare training. Why do you want that? I don't know. But you could have reasons for wanting all kinds of things. That doesn't mean that you don't want to have a choice in what happens around you. It also doesn't mean you don't want your elected representatives to act contrary to what you said you wanted to do. When I say I'm voting for you to be on the city council because I feel like you represent me in the neighborhood that I live in, and then I go to you and I say, not just me, but all these other people that also live in the neighborhood came over to your house and said, hey, we want you to eat apples for breakfast. And then you wake up and you say, you know what? I know y'all said you wanted me to eat apples, but I'm really not going to do that because I have a deal with the orange people. So I'm going to eat oranges instead. Okay, well, you're not representing anybody now. You're representing yourself. And that's what we're seeing. Members of the city council representing themselves and not the people who are meant to be represented. And the city of Atlanta's mayor also jumping in unasked. Nobody asked for him to even be part of the process, because this should have been between the city council, the city clerk, and the people. That's the referendum process. Why the mayor is involved, that's somebody else's question. I don't know. He should probably just see his way back to his office.
Yeah, let's go ask him what's going on. I think the work that has been done. I mean, again, as you're talking, I'm just thinking of all the times that we have wanted a similar result, asking similar questions. So, for example, when Tyree Nichols was murdered by the police, all of these mayors, including the mayor of Bass of Los Angeles, were like, oh my God, it's a tragedy. This is awful. This is terrible. And it's like, okay, LAPD is like one of the most murderous police departments in the country. And you actually have nothing to say, nothing, literally nothing to say when LAPD does the same thing, worse, different, but still terrible, to harm people in Los Angeles. Like, you have nothing to say, but you can look across the street or across the country at what's happening and have something to say about it. And I think, we've always been, we try to figure out and try all these different methods to get electeds, to get people, particularly Democratic electeds, Democratic, influencers and people that are policymakers able to push to do something different, because they know what's up. This is the thing that's annoying. It's like, you know what's up, but you're not saying anything. And as you said, it's because of where the interests are. I just had was part of a really interesting conversation where someone pointed out that capitalism only has interest, not reason. Because someone was saying, well, that's not logical for these people to act this way. And the response was, right, interests are not always logical. Yeah. And so as you were talking, that's what I was thinking about. It's like, okay, now that certain people are in power, they may think that this idea of flouting democracy is cute because it serves their interest. But you would think that they would recognize that things change like that. The unexpected happens. Trump 2016. So when you've just flouted democracy like that, why don't you think that someone else is going to come in and continue to build upon that, that dismantling of democracy that these people are doing? Why aren't they thinking about that?
You know what? I genuinely don't understand that at all, because we can see with these RICO charges that they put on these activists who are involved, that is the Attorney General, the state Attorney General, Chris Carr. He wants to run for governor. Brian Kemp, another one who literally hates dissent, hates protest, has been trying to make protests basically illegal in the state of Georgia for years. I mean, for years. This is a very real Republican project, not just in this state, but certainly like all over the country, where you're seeing like a lot of repression happening around like peaceful protesting or any kind of dissent against the state. Now, if you take that like macro level and bring it down to the city level, and you're seeing like people who donated to a bail fund, people who brought food to people who were like living in the forest, those people are being charged with a very, very serious crime. They're being told that they're a part of like a gang mentality, all because there's a larger project at play where they want people to not be able to disagree with what they want. And so for these Democrats on city council, for the mayor, all of whom for the most part are Democrats, there are some who are not, for them to be engaging in the same process and to be using the same kinds of like arguments against people who are merely trying to participate in a democratic process. Like, that is it. My mom called me the other day and she was like, I'm so worried. I hope you don't, are you gonna get arrested? Are you gonna, get charged with something? And I was like, well, first of all, I don't know if I'm gonna get charged with anything, but what I do know is I've done zero things that have been illegal. It's not illegal to talk to someone yet. It's not illegal to have someone sign a petition. It's not illegal to give water to somebody who's thirsty, unless they're in line to vote in Georgia, in which case you can't give them nothing.
I was about to say now you've crossed the line. It's also illegal in some parts of this country to give water to unhoused people, to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked. Yes, this is where we are. This is where we are, Aimée.
This is unfortunately where we are. I hate this. Yes.
But no, I mean, and it is scary. I mean, people are frightened. People are frightened. People are looking and saying, hey, if I donate to the bail fund, is that now going to make me a part of the conspiracy?
Mm-hmm.
Some of these tactics, really, they are so just warming over things that they did in the past, which I think is also an important piece that we need to bring to the table as we're engaging in this fight. Whether, particularly Stop Cop City, because of where they've taken it on all the battlefronts, right? The legal battlefront, the organizing battlefront, the civic engagement battlefront, the activism battlefront, they're like everything, right? The media and journalistic battlefront, there's no quarter that they have left where they aren't trying to create havoc. I think about how when the Black Panther Party, so many of those charges were charges that were based upon feeding breakfast to people. Like, you have associated yourself with this group, and based upon the fact that we have decided this group is a threat because of what they think and how they teach and what they do for the people, we are now going to make it so, criminalize that. And then anyone that supports it also becomes criminalized. We can look at the civil rights movement. Now, this is all within a people's lifetime. Like, my father is 81. This is in his lifetime, right? Some of this is in my lifetime. I'm not quite as old as he is, but still, right? And so it's not something that we have to look deep into books. We can just talk to some people and understand that, hey, I mean, the civil rights movement, similarly, when you hear the story of Belafonte and Poitier smuggling the cash or whatever they're doing to try to get, there's a reason for that. There's a reason they didn't just wire the money. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Or like Peter Chase in New Orleans feeding all those activists who could not eat anywhere else because they were Black and couldn't go to a restaurant. And also the Freedom Riders needed food in order to, get on the bus and go.
Right. So
These
this
are
is
like activities that are usually seen as like a beautiful thing. And they are criminalizing like just being a part of a community, having solidarity with one another, having like mutual aid. Mutual aid is now being criminalized because it's terrifying to them to think that like we actually can take care of each other. We can take care of ourselves. We don't need to rely on certain like state built resources in order for things to like run smoothly around here.
Yeah, and another quote that a quotable quote that I tapped out in this conversation that I had this past week. Solidarity is us sharing with each other. That's the piece that, as you said, they find to be frightening. And they know we want to be in solidarity, and they know that our solidarity involves sharing and caring. And so they targeted the sharing and caring activity. They targeted that more than they did the things that, could be considered vandalism. You feel me? Which, again, you ain't gonna die, okay? You ain't gonna die, right? But the things they really targeted, where they really tried to get their oomph in, were the things that were about people taking care of us, the hashtag we got us, the hashtag we keep us safe. Like, it's almost like they did a study, which I'm sure they did, on what those things are associated with, and said, yeah, that's what we're going for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think you're exactly right. There probably was a study. There's probably more than one.
There's probably more than one. Before we leave out, we definitely want to know how people can support. I'm making the call, and I'll make it here again publicly, to attorneys that are radical, that have the interest, the capacity. No one's asking you to pick up any cases, but we always got to be on the ready. I am not in Georgia. I am in Los Angeles, but I'm in the ready. I'm on the team. I'm ready to if someone throws something my way, to do the research, to get some law students to help out, etc. If that's your battleground, your battlefield, there's ways that people can tap in there. I know there's ways that people can tap in again on all of these different battlefields where the city, the state, and those who want to stop Cop City are engaged. To talk us through some of that, and where do we go to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, look, if there's obviously going to be a big legal fight. So you're right. Like, if there are people who have legal expertise, they should definitely donate that time, volunteer in that way, because it will be extremely useful. Certainly money is always a useful way that you can participate, and anybody can donate. They can go to copcityvote.com. We have a donate button on there, and we need money to power this campaign. We had some canvassers that we paid because we needed more feet on the ground, just like we had canvassers who volunteered. It costs money to run an office, like to have a place where people could come to sign the petitions and keep the lights on, have air conditioning in there so we wouldn't be pouring sweat like we were in the beginning. But all those things cost money, just like anything else. And so if you can donate, if you can spare anything, it would be incredibly useful. We're still trying to figure out like what the next phase of this looks like. So I don't really have a lot of answers about how people can, like, specifics about how people can get involved. But I will say, like, just paying attention and reading the news about what is going on here, and honestly understand what's going on wherever it is that you live. Because like you said earlier, this is not a Atlanta thing, it's not a Georgia thing, it's happening all over the country. And so if you see something where you're living and it looks very familiar to what we're seeing here, make a note of that and call it out. Because if we just sit here silently and let these things happen around us, then we will lose the very things that we find to be most valuable.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you again. Thank you so very much for joining me. Always great speaking with you. Can't wait to get to Georgia so I can do some things. I got some plans. I got some things that I'm gonna have to wait till I get to Georgia to talk about.
Well, I look forward to it. We need you.
It's gonna be great. Thank you so very much.
Well, thank you.